Hello and welcome. Today we're looking at the recent Assetto Corsa Competizione 1.6 update, including the new 2020 World Challenge Pack DLC. And yes, I know, I'm aware I'm a little late to the party here. A few reasons for that. First, I'd intended to do it on release day, but it was dropped a little late for me in the day, mostly because of some other stuff I had to do. Second, it was recently my birthday. So I'm now a little bit older, and I've spent too much of my time drunk or recovering from said drink. And lastly, because as this is very early in my channel's life, I figured now was a good time to start experimenting with some stuff, and in this case, presentation and most importantly, script writing. Yup, I've actually taken the time to write down what I want to say and do some proper research so that I don't sound like a total idiot on here. Just a partial one. Anyway, let's get on with taking a deep dive into the 1.6 update, and we'll start with the new content. The main point of interest for me in the DLC is obviously Imola, more correctly known as the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, a fantastic track with a long, illustrious and sometimes tragic history that sits near Imola, about 40 kilometres east of Bologna in Italy. In the past, it's been home to the San Marino Grand Prix, an event it hosted from 1981 to 2006, and even stepped in to host a round just recently for Formula One under the name the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. It was a pity it didn't use the old traditional name. Would have been a nice tip of the hat, I feel. For the GT World Challenge Series this year, the circuit hosted a 3-hour race on the 26th of July with Audi Team WRT taking the Pro victory, whilst Barwell Motorsport and Garage 59 took the Silver and Pro-Am classes respectively. The circuit itself has been fully laser scanned and is an incredible reproduction, as you can see here. The pack also includes 2 new cars, the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo 2020 and the Mercedes-Benz GT3 Evo. The 488 Evo is the 3rd generation of the 488 GT3 and features a longer wheelbase to bring the car into line with the GTE model, and also reduces tyre wear. The front of the car has also been redesigned with a smaller frontal section under the headlights for improved stability. The Mercedes-Benz GT3 Evo also has revised aero with an all-new front and rear of the car. There is also new electronics introduced to help make the car easier to drive close to the limits. Comparing the two, for me the Ferrari felt the more agile of the two, with the big front-engine Mercedes feeling a bit more understeery. Although, maybe that is just the default setups, as I haven't yet spent any time tuning the cars, so your mileage may vary. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the DLC content, but for $7.99, that's British pounds, it seems quite reasonable, to be perfectly honest, especially when you think of all the updated liveries that arrive at the same time and are being provided just as part of the 1.6 update. Speaking of which, let's dig into the patch notes and see what it means for us racing away here. Okay, first the general stuff gets mentioned in the notes, mostly referring to the new content and updating the 2020 grid with all entries, teams and drivers. It also mentions, though, that the bonus liveries that were added during the 2019 season have been added to the 2020 season of cars as well, which is nice. The AI has also been updated with new algorithms for racecraft and attacking, which should hopefully result in a better single-player experience. Although, when I was filming the footage used in this video, I didn't notice too much difference, but then I didn't have the aggression turned all the way up either, so this is something I'll have to experiment with in the near future. The AI, though, has also had some changes to the throttle algorithms for lower skill drivers at higher difficulties, and some adjustments to the lines used by the AI on some tracks. Unfortunately, it doesn't go into much detail here. The next bit is all about some marshal fixes at various tracks and some tweaks to the blue and yellow flag sensitivity. Yellows are now created at the centre position and not the starting point of an incident to make yellow flag zones more accurate, which is good. Now, on to the fun stuff, the physics updates. Let's get the little things out of the way first. Wet tyres have received some tweaks and fine-tuning. Doesn't go into a lot of detail here, but in relation to this, the Porsche 911 GT3 and the BMW M6 GT3 have both had their wet presets fixed. The BOP system has also been revised and support for the new cars has been added to it. This includes new camber limitations as per the new 2020 regulations, which is good to see. Finally, a few minor changes to the collision meshes, and your brakes should wear down a little bit slower. Now for the big stuff. The DHE tyres are available for applicable cars for the 2020 season. Kunos say these should provide better feedback and traction with less overheating like in real life. You might not get dramatically better lap times with the new tyres though, as overall grip has not been increased, but they should help people be more consistent over a stint. These tyres are only available when playing the 2020 season though, as the older seasons will retain their tyres and BOP. In multiplayer, to use the tyres, you need to select the _2020 versions of the circuit in order to get them. So you may need to save tunes for both sets of tyres for the 2019 cars. Luckily, Kunos has also added an explicit season tag to the server list, so you know which variant you'll be racing on. Also just a reminder that the Intercontinental GT tracks do not have these new tyres, but they may do in the future, as a look at the blog put a handy yet when pointing this out. Now, Kunos also state in the patch notes that they've made global improvements to their tyre model. This is in relation to their tyre realignment forces. Further reading on their forum shows that overall these forces have been reduced, allowing for a more consistent tyre around the limits of grip. A side effect of this is actually a more communicative force feedback as well, as these forces feed into the suspension and thus to the steering wheel itself. This should make itself most pronounced during transitions and lightly loaded situations like chicanes, where you should have more feel and stability, particularly in mid-engine cars. More improvements have been made to the tyre model though, through the tyre pressures and how it affects the grip of the car. Tyres will now be a bit more sensitive to the pressure and you will feel less grip when it's not optimum, to the extent that you will feel the weight of your force feedback change as the tyres heat up. This update will also have an effect on rolling resistance. More pressure, for those unaware, generally equals less resistance, with pressure being a compromise between corner grip, where you kind of want it low for a bigger contact patch, and the straights where a higher pressure gives more speed. Previously, very fast drivers would exploit the tyre model and run high pressures, as whilst it sacrificed speed in the corners slightly, you had a big advantage in acceleration and top speed. This will now be less effective, as you will compromise braking and cornering much more when trying to do this. Lastly, we see aero yaw improvements on the patch notes. Now, yaw is the angle the car is at relative to its movement. Best way to picture this is drifting. When the car is sliding, the yaw angle is pretty large, and in drift competitions, you want as much as possible. When racing, not so much. So what we have here is a refinement of the Assetto Corsa aero system that adapts to the yaw of the car a little bit more. This should mean whilst the car is under control, you're not going to notice anything different, but when you get a little sideways, the aero will be less effective and will drop off much more realistically. And then things will get a whole lot harder to control the faster you're going. The blog post, though, on the Assetto Corsa forums has some nice diagrams and stuff. I'll post a link in the description so you can read up more if you're particularly interested. Right, let's move on to audio notes next. You can now bind master volume up and down controls for use during a race, which could prove very handy. There's also been some improvements made to the spotter system, as well as an improved message system. There are some new messages for faster cars approaching, plus a pre-session countdown. Lastly, thunder can now be heard before heavy rain shows up, which is both more realistic, but will also prove a handy warning that things are running are very tricky indeed. UI is up next. Some minor styling tweaks here, notably special events leaderboards. Looks like the updated manufacturer details on the UI/leaderboards as well to keep them up to date. Also, during replays, you can now toggle the results table, which should make for some nice consistent videos. MFDs have been showing some love with checkboxes now only responding to left or right, freeing up a couple of buttons for other things. The MFD is also now always visible when the HUD is hidden, and cycling the MFD no longer unhides the HUD. As mentioned under audio, bindable inputs for the master volume have been added. But alongside this, they've added inputs to alter the force feedback's gain as well whilst in session. So you can turn that up and down if you needed to. Lastly, some obsolete information has been removed from loading screens, and the delta and predicted lap time accuracy have been improved. On to graphics. Patch notes say there's been some performance optimizations, which is always welcome. This includes some secondary animations and the spectator mode. The mirror has also had some options added to the graphics settings where you can limit its refresh rate or leave it set to auto, which is a dynamic setting. We've also got a few minor graphical fixes, including stopping the virtual camera from clipping into some of the car's cockpits, which could be a little bit distracting. Right at the bottom of the patch notes, we find the control updates. I've already mentioned the force feedback controls being added, but at the very bottom it says it's added a gamepad rumble effect type toggle. There it lists legacy or enhanced types, with legacy being the, and I quote, implementation used to date. I can't find any further information on the enhanced mode and what that's about, or what it changes to the feel from a gamepad, but there we go. If you do play on a pad, let me know what it did, and if you feel it's an improvement or not in the comments. Anyway, that's all for this update. I'll see you guys on track. Have fun, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.